Thank you so much for the introduction, and thanks everybody for being here today. I'm going to be talking about my work that I did in collaboration with my colleagues at Cornell Tech and the University of Michigan. And I'm going to be talking about our multi-perspective study of VPN users and VPN providers. So I'm sure you've all noticed that over the past decade, the fame and demand for commercial VPNs has been steadily increasing. VPNs are increasingly being marketed seemingly as a solution to many issues ranging from surveillance and protection from tampering, hacking, and so on. Now, all of this has fueled the VPN industry to grow into a multi-billion-dollar industry. And VPN products have now found their way into a regular internet user's toolbox. And VPNs have attracted some academic attention in that researchers have studied and documented various issues in the technical implementations, and we've heard from some today already. But the ones studying the human factors have focused on very specific issues, such as looking into factors behind what goes into users adopting and retaining VPNs, attitudes of college students and corporate users using VPNs, and misconceptions about what VPNs and Tor and other tools like that provide users and the advertisement around these tools. But there are still fundamental questions about the VPN ecosystem that are still unanswered. For instance, in using a VPN, a user essentially transfers trust from their ISP to the VPN provider. But we don't yet know what features encourage them to make this shift and what the perceived benefits of doing this change to VPNs is. Now, on the other hand, some parts of the industry have been known to use various marketing tactics and dark patterns. I'm sure many of us have noticed the sort of discounts that I've put up here, things like heavy discounts that seem to be on a time limit and confusing array of promo codes and things like that. But we don't really know what impact these tactics have on the users. And we don't yet have visibility into the industry to understand the reasons and the incentives for sustaining such practices. Now, in order to gain a clear understanding of such a large consumer ecosystem, we really need to be studying both the users and the VPN providers. It's very important to see the issues from both perspectives and report any gaps in understanding and create knowledge to fill these gaps. So to that end, we are the first to conduct a multi-perspective study of VPN users and VPN providers and augment them to extract insights and present actionable recommendations to improve the ecosystem. So we developed a user study and using a 3-stage development process that I'll talk about in a minute. And we also created VPN provider interview questionnaire to be counterparts to the survey. First, we conducted small-scale user interviews and attended community events around the topic to extract some key concerns. Next, we analyzed these interview responses and extracted main themes from them. And using these themes, we devised an initial survey instrument to study VPN users. And in order to reduce the potential for biases from, say, the ordering or the phrasing of questions, we conducted systematic cognitive pretesting in 3 different phases, and we iteratively improved the survey between each phase. And for the VPN provider interviews, we developed the questions using the same themes that I mentioned. And we also added some questions to understand the inner workings of the VPN ecosystem as a business, to extract things that, that you can only learn from working in the industry. So we launched our user study in March 2021 in partnership with Consumer Reports. We received over 1,500 responses from users in 40 countries. And for this study, we decided to focus on the US-based participants because we had enough responses from this country to draw meaningful conclusions. For the analysis of the survey data, we used chi-square tests for identifying statistically significant differences between different groups of users. And for the VPN provider interviews, we conducted semi-structured, open-ended interviews with 9 leading VPN providers. And for the analysis, we used an inductive open coding approach and combined it with thematic analysis. We collaboratively identified emerging themes for each question and common themes across different questions and different providers. So, before we go into the results, one thing I want to talk about is that we had 28 questions in the user survey. So we systematized our, all of the results from all of those questions into 6 main research questions. And we use certain user characteristics to divide the user population to see how the differences would be. So the first one of those is expertise. So we asked users to self-report their security and privacy expertise based on, and we report the results based on how high, moderate, and limited expertise users responded to the questions. And the other distinction we make is whether they used paid VPNs or they preferred free VPNs. This is another thing that we intuitively thought would bring about differences in how people used and felt about VPNs. So now on to the results. So the first question that I'm sure all of you are thinking of is, why do users use a VPN? So for this question, users were able to select multiple reasons. And for US-based users, we find that typically they use it for security and privacy reasons, like Matthew was mentioning in his talk before. And only very few users listed circumvention or torrenting as one of the reasons. And this is expected for a US-based user sample. And when trying to learn about users' needs and requirements in a VPN, we saw that speed, price, and easy-to-use GUI were consistently among the top three. And price especially was a big criteria for limited and moderate expertise users. Now, this shows us that discounts and marketing around these factors is bound to have a vast effect on these users. Now, given the different needs and the criteria, we wanted to understand what resources users use to find and choose the right VPNs for them. And we find that users use search engines and VPN recommendation websites and reading the VPN provider's own website to find the VPN for their needs. They lean on these methods more heavily than more traditional methods like word of mouth or recommendations from friends and family. Now, I want to highlight specifically the search engines and the recommendation websites and say that almost 94% of users that use them rated them moderately or extremely trustworthy. And we'll come back to why this is important in just a minute. Now, next, the other thing we want to look at was, have users explain their threat model and learn, who they're protecting and securing themselves against. And we find that hackers, advertisement companies, and their ISPs are the top three entities in the user's threat model. And we find that fear of foreign or domestic government surveillance is much lower on their priorities list. And this is interesting because post-Snowden surveillance revelations in 2014, many users were reportedly moving towards tools like VPNs or anonymity tools like Tor. But our results indicate a possible shift in users' attitudes and show a growing concern towards corporate and advertisement surveillance. Now, looking at previous work that were studying advertisements on YouTube, we hypothesized that this shift could be due to the influence of marketing around VPNs and the security advice that users are exposed to. Next, when it comes to users' mental models, we find alarmingly that almost 40% of users have a flawed mental model of what VPNs provide them. And they think that their ISPs can still see websites and other data about what websites they're visiting when they're on a VPN. Now, this worryingly includes users of all different expertise levels. And on top of this, another 40% of users indicated that they were unsure what data VPNs can collect about them. And some even think that VPNs can collect sensitive data like private messages. And these suggest that we have a long way to go when it comes to user education. From our VPN provider interviews, we were able to extract some key themes from the responses. And in these slides, I've listed the main themes that came up, and you can learn more about what we summarized under these themes in the paper. But for this presentation, I'm going to skip to the part where we augment results from both the users and the VPN providers. And I'll talk about the key areas of misalignment that we found. One of the biggest areas of misalignment was users' reliance on recommendation websites, which I talked about before. 94% of those users even believe that these sites are trustworthy. But 6 out of the 9 VPN providers that we talked to emphasize that these websites run on money and they auction off #1 spots on their rankings for money. And the providers even say that the review ecosystem is largely money motivated and they're not objective about the rankings at all. And there's also been reports of VPN companies and their parent companies owning these sort of recommendation sites as well. So since these sites stand to make a lot of money from the users, they'll continue to exploit them unless security and privacy advocates like us can shed light on these practices. The next key area of misalignment that we found was users' view on data collection. You will recall that 40% of users were not really sure what data was being collected about them. And a number of them even think very sensitive data like keystrokes or messages were being recorded by VPNs. But on the other hand, VPN providers claim that they clearly communicate their practices and their data protection methods. But our recommendation is to focus on more effective user education campaigns. Which also brings me to the actionable recommendations part, where we put together the knowledge from all parts of this project, and we list some recommendations for the community. First, we recommend that the FTC and other government organizations enforce oversight on VPN ads and curb malicious tactics, because misleading ads could further degrade mental models of users on what VPNs can offer them. Next, we advocate for coordinated efforts from the industry and academia and consumer protection organizations to bring attention to the flawed VPN recommendation ecosystem and shed light on these practices, as I mentioned. Now, our team is working on studying these sites, and hopefully you'll hear more about that soon. Finally, we also show that user education campaigns must be prioritized, and we have identified a few key areas of improvement, which are namely users' mental models of what VPNs can offer them and what it can do, and the threat models for which VPNs can be most useful. And we also urge organizations like the EFF, CDT, FTC, and community initiatives like the IFF to devote more of their efforts towards user education campaigns and raise awareness and advocate for better VPN industry oversight. So that's my presentation, and with that, I'll open the floor for questions.